No, ex-military. Works for an NGO now.
You've got him on the line?
Exactly. He's on the ground there, actually. I should really, get back to it.
Of course. Go ahead. Oh, and Kate, send me a note later. Thanks.
Hello, Nathan? Sorry to keep you waiting. My editor. Where were we?
Hey, you were asking about the guy, the one that went back there, the guy that,
Ah, that's right. And did you know him well?
No, not really. He worked maintenance on our trucks.
He was employed by IDAP.
No, nothing like that. I mean, he just helped us out a few times. Off the book stuff. Guy was a local mechanic. Family business type thing, you know?
I see.
I remember he had a place on the edge of town, not far from our setup. We'd chat from time to time. He's a nice guy, friendly.
And do you know where he was going that day?
To the church.
He was going to church.
No, don't get me wrong. I mean, that place had been abandoned for almost a year. But he was looking for his brother.
At the church?
Yeah, there'd been reports of, pretty brutal firefight up there. He'd heard his brother might have been caught up in it.
Sure, and I'm not quite clear on this. Was his brother still alive?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't think he knew either. Seems like he was on his way to find out.
So, his brother, he was in the army?
Yes and no. It's complicated. You gotta remember it was pretty chaotic back then.
Of course. Okay, let's back up a bit.
Sure.
What complicated the situation?
Just the history of it all. His brother had been a recruit in the Alta's Armed Forces, boot camp, basic training, you know. Well, this is back when NATO was still keeping the peace. But after U.S. forces pulled out, apparently he deserted.
Do you know why?
No, just I know they argued a lot about it.
Hello, Kate speaking.
Hey, sorry about that. Call must have dropped. The network out here is garbage.
No problem. It's understandable. Are you still driving?
Yeah, we're not at the town yet. Hold on a sec. Andy, we almost there.
We're, a little ways out. Oh, and we need to make one quick stop, too.
Thanks, bud. So, where'd we get cut off?
You were telling me about the church. The landmine? The accident.
Right, yeah. Well, of course, a civilian casualty like that, particularly, at a church, I guess it kind of refocused our attention here.
Had IDAP been particularly active in the area?
Yeah. I mean, our project had a handful of camps spread across the country. But yeah, I was in the town itself for a few months. It's all different now, though.
How so?
Well, for one thing, IDAP used to be based right in the heart of Rio Castro. Of course, this was all pre-war. I remember, at that time, the local military maintained a checkpoint on the outskirts of town. That was understandable. I mean, the whole area was a kind of Wild West. Big mashup of civilian and guerrilla infrastructure. Disaster waiting to happen, really. I don't know. It's strange to see our camp based there now.
Hey, sorry about the holdup. We're on the way now.
All right, thanks, Andy.
So, what's your role there today?
Now, in general, the provision of aid. There was a lot of damage. IDAP fills the gap. Drinking water, basic medicine, post-war cleanup, in other words.
And on the ground, how does that translate to your work?
It's a mixed bag. Like today, part demining, part unexploded ordnance disposal.
I see.
Heads up, Mac. Almost there.
Got it. I'm sorry about that. We're arriving now. Give me a sec.
All right, Mac. Got your stuff all laid out here.
Hold on just a sec, Kate. I need to get set up.
Take your time.
All right, then. You got everything? Detector working? You remember how to switch it on, right?
Hey, sorry, I forgot to mention, the demining toolkit, totally forgot to pack it up this morning.
That's no big deal. We're just locating the mines for now. Just keep me posted.
Are you free to talk, Nathan?
Sure. For now, I'm just sweeping the road for mines, getting a lay of the land, you know. The detector lets us see what we're dealing with here. I can work and chat.
Question. What happens when you do find a landmine?
Ordinarily, we disarm it, but today, small oversight, and we haven't got all our gear right now.
Oh, it's on the way, I hope.
Yeah, it's all good.
So, since the war's now over, has your own role changed at all?
Yeah, I guess so. Now I'm almost entirely focused on EOD and UXO.
And that's something you did in the military, too?
Yeah, that's the thing about mines. War or not, win, lose, they don't go away.
How many minefields are you facing on Altis?
That we know of, 22. 23 including whatever's here. Plus you've got Stratus, another 4 over there, I think.
I see. And can you estimate, roughly, how long it would take to remove them all?
A lot of variables, but cleanup operation of this size, if it's only IDAP, we're talking years.
Do you ever get nervous?
Yeah, but not when I'm working. It hits you after. Or before. Andy, I'm at the barricade.
Cool, and the road?
Yeah, it's...
How well do you remember the town?
You mean before it was destroyed? Vividly. Hey, quick tidbit for you. Oreo Castro means beautiful castle in the local lingo.
Oh, I didn't know that. Do you speak the language?
Not so much, only with the older generation. Not a problem now, though.
Oh?
Well, Oreo Castro's pretty much a ghost town. Nothing here but remnants of war and a couple of goats. And they aren't exactly great conversationalists.
What do you hope to achieve in the town? What's your end goal?
Poke around, get rid of all the bad stuff, ERW, explosive remnants of war. In Oreo Castro, that'll be landmines and some leftover ordnance. There was a beautiful oak tree here once, 300 years old. Folks used it as a meeting spot. They'd pin notes for one another on the trunk.
The mechanic you've been telling me about, he and his brother, they'd always lived there.
In the town, you mean? Yeah, as far as I know. The family business, the garage, it kind of kept them rooted. The church, where the mines are, it's sealed off now.
By IDAP?
No, NATO. They lost some guys there in the firefight. One of their EODs is helping clear the place. But, he's not exactly moving quickly.
Hey, fuckhead! You wanna...
Hey, Andy,
Yep. What's up?
what's the deal with the church? Can we get in or what?
Sorry, Mac. No dice. NATO's got first dibs. They're bringing their boys home. Bag and tag. Best leave them to it.
I'll come back later. What a mess. Loose rubble everywhere.
You up at the armory, Mac? We need to make a note to sort that shit out. Probably a whole bunch of ordnance lying around.
I'll come back later. Huh. Where a camp used to be.
Anything left?
Not much. Few memories, maybe. Just some old boxes here and there.
IDAPs.
Yeah. I got a UXO here dug right into the wall.
Shit. You'll need the toolkit for that job. I'll get on the horn to dispatch, see what's taking them so long.
I'll come back later. The people here, they didn't have much love for their army.
Why do you think that is?
History, I guess. This place never supported the military takeover, the Kavala coup and all that. Plus, stationing troops in the town, nobody believed the government's spin about training. They were seen as an occupying force there to keep a lid on things. Huh. I got a blocked door here.
Yep. NATO still hasn't gotten its ass into gear. I can make some calls, but,
I'll come back later. By the way, Kate, I guess everyone there's pretty busy, you know, covering the peace talks?
At AAN?
Yeah.
It's quite hectic, yes. We're flying out a team, actually. Should be on the ground in the next few days.
Any insider info?
Well, it seems likely Nikos Panagopoulos will be the new president.
Really? That ex-guerrilla? Hell, Colonel Acantero's days must really be numbered. It was NATO that helped bring him in. Actually, it was one hell of a supply drop.
So, the supply drop, this was when exactly?
Right around the time we saw the ceasefire starting to break down. Must be more than a year ago now.
So, at that time, your camp was in the center of town?
Yeah, things were getting pretty desperate, though. I remember we hadn't been resupplied in months. No food, water, medicine. We were used to issues with logistics, but I don't know, in the end it got so bad U.S. forces prepared an airdrop. Not an easy task considering, but those crates, they really were life and death. That's why we needed somebody on the ground. Someone to make sure they came down okay.
And who was that?
A guy named Adams, part of the NATO peacekeeping force. Close friend of mine, actually.
Adams? He went out alone?
From the way he told it, he may as well have. No, he went along with some new recruits, local bunch. It was his job to show them the ropes.
Something I'm not quite clear on. Why didn't IDAP transport the aid themselves? There must have been a reason.
Yeah, there was. A couple of weeks previously, guerrillas had ambushed a convoy. It was some dissident group out to sabotage the peace talks in Kavala. Anyway, NATO intervened and the whole thing just blew up. A checkpoint was hit. Protesters were fired upon at the MOD.
Yes, we were there. AAN.
And you know how bad it got.
Our movements were limited by the government.
Exactly. And convincing anybody to reassign troops, to escort NGOs, just a total non-starter.
Tell me more about your friend. He was your liaison, right?
Right. But Adams and I had a history. We'd met on a previous deployment. This guy was your typical Army lifer. Cynical, sarcastic, big heart, pissed off with everyone, everything, all the time. But he always seemed to know where to find a beer, and was always willing to share it. One of the drop zones available to Adams was out on the coast. Once he'd called in the airdrop, that was it. They just had to sit tight, hope for the best.
One thing I don't understand, what were they doing there, all the way up in the mountains?
The town, Oreo Castro, this place has historic ties with the guerrillas. For years, people here would provide them with food, water.
I see.
The government responded by draining the swamp.
And that involved sending soldiers?
Yeah, coin ops. Adams and his guys were there to remind them of their R2P.
Just a sec, I'm getting a bit lost in the lingo here.
Oh, gotcha. R2P is their responsibility to protect. Counterinsurgency can get real messy real quick. He was in charge of training, laws of armed conflict, that kind of thing. Adams normally tossed out an orange smoke grenade, which marked his position for the pilot.
So, these crates, were there a lot of them, or...?
No, just 4. One contained medicine, another fresh drinking water. The rest were packed with rice or grain. Adams had to inspect each one individually. Later, we'd arrange collection. It wasn't uncommon for the sacks of grain to split on impact, but that time, we got lucky. He didn't lose a single one. Sacks of rice, they'd scattered everywhere and burst open, irretrievable. The medical items, they'd been trashed. Vials were broken, just a total mess. It was a disaster. Adams didn't know it, but one of our doctors, he lost a patient because of that. Unfortunately, the crate containing water came down heavy. Most of the bottles inside had split open. As for the crates, they still needed to be checked before anyone else arrived. Now, the thing with airdrops, they're not exactly subtle. Smoke, noise of the plane, those bright green parachutes, they're gonna get you noticed. And when you're in the middle of bandit country, that's a problem.
The guerrillas attacked.
Yeah, from what I heard, it was pretty intense. I don't have the numbers, but maybe 6 or 7 were killed.
And what happened when the supplies had been secured?
Adams would fire a flare. Back at the camp, of course, we'd heard all the gunfire, but that flare, when we spotted it, I don't know, felt like finding a moment of hope or something.
Sure. I can only imagine. And thanks for sharing. It puts a human perspective on my work. Speaking of which, your friend, do you think he'd be willing to contribute further? Even, off the record? What with the topic of my article? Having an expert, an instructor on the laws of war.
Look, I'm sorry. I know he'd help out however he could, but listen, he died on Stratus. Year and a bit later. Landmine.
Mac, heads up. Bobcat's on the move. Driver wouldn't wait.
That's fine, thanks, Andy. Hey, Kate, bear with me. It's gonna get a little noisy here. We gotta clear out some mines.
Take your time. Just let me know when you can talk.
What a mess. Loose rubble everywhere.
You up at the armory, Mac? We need to make a note to sort that shit out. Probably a whole bunch of ordnance lying around.
I'll come back later. Okay, road's safe now. Bring the van on up.
Will do. Also, Mac, the NATO guys, they've kicked in all the doors. You're free to search inside the buildings now.
Got it. At least I can get out of the fucking rain. I'll come find you in a bit.
Have fun reminiscing.
Our camp in the town, I still remember it clear as day.
Were there many of you?
From IDAP? No, not really. 4, maybe. Sometimes a couple more, depending on what we had going on. It was mainly logistics, but we did have a doctor and an ambulance. Morning. You been in?
You kidding me? I ain't going in there, man. That shit's all yours.
Where are you now?
Who, me? I'm exploring.
I can hear an echo.
Yeah, I'm in what used to be the mayor's place, actually. At least it was before the government forces took it over.
Tell me more about Staff Sergeant Adams. You met him on a previous deployment. That must have been in Generous, right?
No, actually, this was after I'd left the military. Previous deployment with IDAP, Pakistan. It must have been, God, 15 years ago? I think. Feels like another lifetime. I got a leaflet here. The Army must have scattered thousands of these.
Propaganda.
Something like that. This one says, there's still time to surrender. Maybe a bad choice of words, considering.
Time to surrender? What's the context here?
This was last year, September. These leaflets, they were dropped maybe a day before the fighting began. You see, the guerrillas there, they'd found themselves a new leader. Charismatic, ex-military. For him, this was no time to surrender. Far from it. In fact, he used that time to rally his people, encourage them to resist, build defenses. Meanwhile, the Army was setting up for a major offensive. The attack on Oreo Castro? It was no secret. Of course, after the leaflet drop, IDAP started to pull out of the town. So the little I do know, well, that brings us back to the brother. The one who disappeared. His name was Alexis. He'd volunteered to build a barricade. Town was his home, after all.
If I understand it, you know about what happened through the brother. Alexis, was it? Did you meet him?
Not directly, but, it's a small town, right? People knew Alexis. After what happened here, I talked to the locals. Found out what I could. The rest of what I know is pieced together from the commission report itself.
Actually, that incident report, the evidence you submitted, that's partly why I asked for the interview. I want to gain a human perspective.
Well, that's understandable. I mean, for a humanitarian commission, those reports tend to be,
A little detached, yes. Do you think Alexis, I don't know, thought twice about taking these vehicles?
Look, sure, these were his neighbors, but this was their home, and it was under attack. What would you do?
Help me out with some context here. This barricade.
I mean, it was crude, right? A gap between two outcrops of rock, natural bottleneck. The guerrillas hoped to block the road by jamming it with vehicles. As for the vehicles in the barricade, the commission actually linked the plates to a number of locals. Of course, several were still missing after the incident, so the investigation made some assumptions. By that point, the guerrillas were short on vehicles, damaged, destroyed, or otherwise. They had to improvise.
So, just to clarify, in your email you said you served as a combat engineer, the Marine Corps?
That's right. South Zagoria, Generous.
Then it's fair to say you're no stranger to the subject of my article, the laws of armed conflict.
I've seen a few things, heard stories. It's rarely been, clear-cut, right and wrong.
Oh, absolutely. That's why it's so important to gain your perspective. You've seen things from both sides. I mean, now as an NGO too.
Sure, yeah.
These vehicles, I suppose all of them were taken without consent.
Well, yeah, given the circumstances. The owners couldn't exactly refuse.
Right, but that's the thing. Never mind theft being illegal. The laws of armed conflict prohibit such actions.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. I was thinking, he even took a local priest's car. I remember I was talking to Father Georgiopoulos, and he was actually very good about the whole thing.
How so?
Something about rich men and camels.
After Alexis built the barricade, what then? Did he stay inside the town?
No, that's where the story gets more complicated. The barricade itself was later chained up and set on fire by someone else. I don't know quite who. Alexis, he headed west to lay mines. Anti-tank mines were already in the ground. If there's no pull fuse, and so long as they've not been stacked, they aren't too hard to remove. But Alexis, although he didn't use anti-handling devices, he did create a hybrid minefield.
AT mines. Mixed with APs.
That's it, yeah. He put anti-personnel mines around the anti-tank ones, made clearance all that much harder. They got them when the government's outposts fell into guerrilla hands. Bounding mines. The type that leaps up a meter into the air before exploding. Nasty stuff. Hell, nowadays they're even made with plastic casing to throw off older types of mine detector.
Lovely.
Oh yeah, just do yourself a favor. Don't look up Bouncing Betty injuries online.
And they're still there?
Mm-hmm. And not for long. We're setting up our demining drones as we speak. You know, thinking about it, even if we had a record of where Alexis's mines were, it may not do much good.
No? I thought minefield maps were a key part of your work.
Most folks don't realize, but landmines, they don't stay put. Heavy rain, landslides, keeping a map current ain't so simple. And with all the earthquakes in this region, there's little chance they'd all be in the same place. I don't know. Maybe just Gallows. Alexis proved to be quite the combat engineer. He placed the mines exactly as he'd been shown.
So, moving on, where did Alexis go next?
He took a quad bike up to the castle behind the town.
The castle? Why?
He was needed at the guerrillas' base camp.
Okay. His group were running things from up at the castle.
And I see what you're getting at. Yeah, Geneva Convention's cultural objects, I think.
Maybe a technical question.
Go ahead.
In these situations, do those involved commonly record the locations of minefields?
That's a tough one. Take this situation, for example. I'm convinced Alexis would have made a record. It's his home, after all. But do we have access to that information? No. And that's the problem. Things, information, people, landmines, they get lost in the fog of war. But that's the thing about landmines. Lost or not, they stick around. They wait to be found.
Do you feel these preparations made a difference?
In the short term, I do, yeah. The barricade held. The government's tanks were knocked out on the road.
And in the long term?
I'd go on, but as you may have heard, it's getting kind of loud here.
By the sounds of it, you've got your hands full.
This'll only take a minute. Be right back.
Bet you wish we had one of those in Pakistan, huh?
I gotta admit, that's 60 tons of getting shit done.
Oh, by the way, while you were busy chatting to, well, whoever that is that isn't your wife...
I told you, Andy, she's a journalist. Get to the point.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I assembled the demining drones.
Both of them?
Well, yeah. They're by the van.
All right, got the terminal.
Cool. So just connect it to a drone and, yeah, take control.
You got it?
Looking good.
So, you're gonna want to use the auto hover mode. Switch it on whenever you need to stay in one place.
Auto hover, right.
I'll arm the explosives once you've reached the minefield. Heads up. Enabling charges. Okay, now, the bombs. You only got 4. Release one and it'll drop straight down. Simple physics. If you run out, fly over to the van. There's plenty spare.
Thanks. These demining charges pack quite a punch. What's in them?
500 grams of Crovex water gel, baby.
I'm out.
Don't sweat it. Steer back on over to the van. I'll rearm you.
Question, how can I see if I've gotten all the mines?
Your drone's got a dedicated sensor. Get close enough, and it'll detect any nearby explosives.
All right, almost done.
Seriously? Nathaniel Francis McDade, how big is this minefield?
Only my mom calls me Francis, Andy.
Yeah, sure thing, Franny Mac. Anyway, you know the drill. Send it back for resupply.
All right, that's it. What the fuck was that?
Relax, relax. It sounds like it came from the other side of town. You want me to take a look?
No, stay put, I'll go. Yeah, collapsed building, UXO, I bet. Skittish things at the best of times.
Disturbed by your demining activity?
Could be. That's what makes them so damn dangerous. You never know if they're gonna stay unexploded.
The Army's offensive against the town. It seems like, well, a disaster, to be honest.
Yeah, they never imagined the guerrillas would put up a fight, that's for sure. The mines on the road caught them off guard, immobilized their armor. They took heavy casualties from mortar and MG emplacements, too. Some even blamed the Army command, said they gifted the enemy time to organize.
The leaflets.
Right. It was a tough call. Complying with the laws of war, it's got a price. Hello. How'd you get here?
Another find.
Mm-hmm. Laser designator. Kind of thing Special Forces would use to call in an airstrike.
Oh, interesting. Actually, the airstrike on the town, the details of that are fuzzy. Do you happen to remember it well? The airstrike, I mean.
Yeah. October 13th. Cluster bomb. Town was shook up pretty bad. The Army just wasn't able to capture the place. And Colonel Arcanteros, he did not tolerate failure. So he asked foreign powers to intervene. Come in, break the guerrillas' resolve.
Right. And the evidence in the commission report, doesn't it point to CSAT?
Yeah. But truth can be the first casualty of war.
Sure, but didn't somebody witness them in action?
From a distance, yeah. Though he wasn't exactly what you'd call reliable. Guy was a goat herd. Barely spoke any English.
That was not in the report I read.
It never is. Still, he did say they came down by parachute, and that at least was corroborated by multiple sources.
These operatives, then? They moved in on the castle?
Yep. Must have been a fire team at least.
The man who claimed to have seen all of this, is there anything else you can tell me about him?
Not much. Like I say, simple goat herd. Lived alone. Small stone shed just north of the castle.
Okay, let's get back to CSAT. What were they doing there, on Altis, at this time?
They were an embedded training team, ETT. Officially, they were just there to oversee counterinsurgency operations.
And unofficially?
Anyone's guess. A lot of different rumors. Black sites, car bombs, false flags. Then, silence. If we're to believe the goat herd, they then set up a position on the battlements. Moved to a vantage point on the castle's outer wall.
Okay, according to my notes, several targets were identified from afar, presumably by these special forces at the castle. Once they had a handle on what was what, they called it in. A jet approached from the east and dropped a single bomb. The positions in the town were then destroyed, but the church and IDAP's camps were left untouched. Does that match up with events as they were given to you?
Yeah, though to manage a guided strike like that, they must have had thermal imaging.
Did IDAP have any workers operating outside the camp?
Mm-hmm. One of our doctors. He'd gone out with medical supplies despite the fighting.
So, IDAP's camp, there weren't any injuries?
No. A miracle, really. Although if we hadn't relocated to the church when we did, it would have been a different story.
درخواست حمله هوایی به موقعیت فرستاده شد. تمام.
Copy that. Strike aircraft on the way. Out.
Do you know why the government signed off on such a heavy-handed response? A cluster bomb? That's rather indiscriminate. Even if it was laser-guided.
Sure, I mean, with a designator, you just switch it on, aim it at, well, whatever. The idea is that you remain in place, keep the laser on target. But even if it's done perfectly, a lot of uncontrolled variables. By all accounts, the town just seemed to explode. Buildings were burning for days.
And this spotter, he just disappeared?
Yeah. Last seen leaving the castle, heading west.
Let's talk about IDAP's doctor. You said he was on his way to the church. Did he make it there?
I'm afraid not. He was close. A minute later, he'd probably have made it. I can certainly say the devastation was severe. Dozens killed, combatants and non-combatants alike. The guerrillas, they were in total disarray. Many fled, retreating to the mountains. And IDAP, we did what we could, but there were so many wounded. So many we'd never be able to identify.
Nathan?
No, I'm still here. I just need to grab something real quick. This'll only take a sec.
I understand that CSAT denied any involvement.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe with good reason.
Oh?
Look, I don't know. There were shell casings found at the castle. NATO mil-spec.
Okay, so then either they were supplying the guerrillas or...
Or they were there. Maybe trying to win back the government support. Maybe...
What?
I don't know.
Hear that? Sounds like our delivery drone.
I'm on it.
Just, check the box underneath for the toolkit.
I swear to God, Andy, if it's empty again...
That was one time. Trust me, you'll be dicking around with landmines soon enough, Mac.
The siege of the town? My notes suggest it lasted for 2 weeks. How could that be?
Divine intervention.
Pardon me?
No, just the weather. Got in their way. Weeks of thick cloud cover blanketed the town.
I'm still not sure I follow.
It prevented the army from calling in Cass. Soon as that cleared, though, well, you know about the cluster strike. Good. Toolkit's here. See you later, little buddy.
What's that?
Nothing. Just, talking to myself.
Okay, little buddy. Sure thing.
Hey, how are you getting on?
Not bad, not bad. Our gear's finally arrived from dispatch. I can start deactivating mines and leftover ordnance now.
Oh, right. And do you do that by hand?
Sure do. Crawl up close, identify it, and then just, disarm the thing.
I'm sure it's more involved than that.
Yeah, well, I may have skipped the part where, it can explode. Gotcha.
I've been meaning to ask, after NATO pulled out, when CSAT stepped in, how did that affect your work?
Day to day? I mean, CoinOps stepped up, but honestly, things are already sliding that way, even with NATO at the helm. For the most part, CSAT were mindful of our activities. Brutal, no doubt, but at least clinical. Whole thing felt like one big PR exercise for them. When I joined IDAP, we were a pretty small outfit.
And how many countries is IDAP active in today?
Now, we're pretty widespread, 50 in the global south alone. CCB, DRR, you name it, we provide aid and development for more than 60 million each year.
If you don't mind me saying, Nathan, you sound... I don't know exactly.
Look, it's great we can help so many now, just back in the day, it wasn't so much politics, It's strange to think kids once played here.
I assume the town was evacuated at some point.
Oh yeah, early on. Many folk left as soon as the ceasefire started to fall apart. Others fled when all those leaflets came. Just a handful of people were here for the end.
You mentioned that IDAP worked with a local mechanic. How did that come about?
Hollywood might call it serendipity, but I don't know. He just saved our ass one time, and then another, and so the story goes. There wasn't much special about his setup, but guy knew the difference between a crankshaft and a tire iron.
He was good at what he did then.
There wasn't much he couldn't fix. Never asked for a receipt, though, if you know what I mean. You know, Alexis' house, his workshop, it was like something from another time.
I'm not quite sure I follow.
Pounding of a hammer, back and forth of a wood saw, I don't know. Things felt simpler back then, is all. Far cry from what was to come. If there's one thing I remember about Alexis, it was the guy's pickup truck. Thing made a hell of a racket.
And his brother, wasn't he a mechanic? Why wouldn't he fix it?
Oh, believe me, he tried. But that was Alexis, stubborn as a mule.
How does IDAP distribute aid? It's a big logistical operation.
Oh, yeah. As the name suggests, we're an international organization. You wouldn't believe the paperwork. Supplies come in from all over Europe, end up at our depot in the Netherlands.
And they're shipped out from there?
Mm-hmm. Worldwide. Ground convoys make up the last leg of the journey. Though sometimes we rely on helilifts and airdrops. Whole families, you know.
What's that, Nathan?
Sorry, I'm talking to myself. Old habit. Just this whole mess.
The war.
Everything. I focus on my work, get the job done, but now and again, it's hard not to think. What happened to the folks here?
How had things deteriorated so quickly? I mean, Altis is not exactly third world, yet food became scarce.
It's the little things. A local delivery stops, trawler is damaged, farmland gets mined. It's an almost imperceptible but fragile network. So when war comes, things just fall apart.
So, Nathan, may I ask, when you first came to Oreo Castro, what were you doing there?
IDAP asked me to give some talks on landmines.
Talks? Who with?
Anyone who'd listen, really. It was all about raising awareness. I remember there used to be a cafe here once. Local place. Actually, that's an understatement. I must have picked up more local curse words there than the entire rest of my time out here put together.
It sounds like quite an institution. Did it shut down when the fighting started?
Eventually. The guy who ran it, he didn't have much love for the government. I remember he used to charge the local soldiers double, called it a tourist tax. And one night he was bundled off in the back of a truck. Never saw that guy again. Going back to what I said about the people here, their support for the guerrillas, sometimes it was a lot more than food and water.
What, guns?
Yeah, even after the government troops arrived, garrisoned their mayor's house, folks were still doing all they could for the cause.
My understanding of NATO's actions, particularly against the guerrillas, it's patchy. Maybe you could help fill the gaps?
Sure. Well, aside from the odd direct engagement, it was mostly aerial support, drone strikes. Of course, that all came from the air base, the one on Stratus.
I see. Not Altis.
No. Even before they were forced to leave, their presence on the mainland didn't stack up to much. Those guys at the outpost, the ones murdered by the guerrillas, They never even got a shot off.
How come?
Not sure. I mean, it all happened at night. Big thunderstorm, heavy rain. But there are rumors. Some even claim the attackers were wearing Army uniforms.
I see. That would constitute a war crime, no? An act of perfidy.
Yeah, but after the executions, in for a dime, in for a dollar.
Those earthquakes you mentioned, weren't there some fairly bad ones not so long ago?
Nothing too major. The worst came during NATO's invasion, actually. Solid 4s and 5s on the Richter scale. The soil out here is pretty loose, though. Folks were worried about gas lines getting damaged. Turns out, they were right to be.
Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't IDAP and NATO share some common goals? The training, for example. The laws of armed conflict?
Sorta. It's a tough one, actually. It was important we didn't overstep the mark.
You had to be impartial.
Precisely. In a conflict, we have to remain neutral, a partner to all parties, even those that, personally, we may object to. There's an old photograph here. Picture of Alexis and his brother Marcos.
The civilian killed at the church. The landmine, right?
Yeah. Although honestly, it was a small miracle he'd made it that far.
Tell me more about Marcos.
Poor guy. He always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He'd made it through the airstrike, but only to get caught up in the assault that followed right after.
There were still guerrillas in the town, even after the strike.
But Oreo Castro, it wasn't just a town. It had become a symbol of the resistance. It was important for both sides, and government forces were making their final push. Alexis had made it out, but his brother? Like I say, Marcos was always shit out of luck. The guy'd been waiting at his brother's place. Marcos was there to talk his brother down, I think. He was only interested in survival, and that meant getting the IDAP at the church.
He remained a non-combatant then?
Protected by the Geneva Conventions, Article 51. But you gotta remember, right after the strike, it was total chaos. An hour or two later, the government sent a truck to our camp. The soldiers searched the civilians for hidden weapons.
But they didn't find any.
No, and we'd already checked. It's vital our camps are weapon-free spaces, safe havens.
And Marcus, he must have made it through then.
Yeah, just about. We talked a few times after. I don't know, he seemed different.
I can imagine why. And what did he do after?
Hard to tell, but like I said, he kept looking for his brother.
Of course. And Marcus, his body, is still there in the churchyard?
Yeah. To think he survived all that just to return to the same spot less than a year later.
Nathan, you said that Alexis had been a recruit in the Altis Armed Forces.
Yeah, that's right.
So his decision to leave the army, to join the guerrillas, do you know how that came about?
It's funny, I asked Marcos the same thing once. He just looked at me and shrugged. Later on, I heard their father had been killed in the Civil War, but I don't know. Whatever his reasons, Marcos seemed to have made peace with the fact he wouldn't change his brother's mind. NATO's been busy. Even managed to clear out a few mines. Special type, too. Very distinctive.
Remnants of the firefight. The one you've been telling me about.
That's right.
And Alexis. He'd been there.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I just met a guy claiming to have known him.
So, this firefight, it was... Just let me check the calendar. 8 days ago?
Yeah. Day of the NATO invasion. After the flashpoint on Stratus, there was chaos. Nobody seemed to know what to do. Finally, NATO got their act together, launched an assault on the Alta's mainland.
And CSAT?
Caught off guard by the whole thing. They were there to fight guerrillas, not start World War III. So when CSAT dropped their support, government forces panicked. They were on the back foot. Needed to regroup. Major Gavras was put in charge, but it was a tall order. Gavras tried to fortify their position in the northwest, but it was a risk, and he ended up cut off. The guerrillas, they didn't hesitate, stormed its position, sent the survivors running.
Okay, and if you don't mind me asking, how did you come to hear this?
Costas Dimitriou, a lieutenant, and the major's adjutant. Along with Gavras, the two of them were trying to make it to a helivac.
You say they were trying to make it?
Mm-hmm. NATO took it out.
How?
Fast mover, 700 meters.
Tank
west.
buster. At that point, they had air supremacy. Caught it on the hop.
Did they have another plan?
Not exactly, but they decided to make a stand at the church.
200 meters, front. Helicopter, 200 meters,
And the
right.
Major, what sort of a man was he? Was he respected?
Yeah, I mean, his reputation wasn't bloodied in the Civil War. Gavras was his own man, knew when to follow orders and when to adapt them.
Not the type to violate LOAC, then?
Well, that's a gray area. In the course of the firefight, the Major used a mine dispenser. You can think of it like a portable minefield. This thing throws 14 mines as much as 50 feet, spread out across a wide arc of fire in front of it.
And they're designed to maim, rather than kill.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. They can still be lethal. The Major ordered Costas to place mines too. Alexis, alongside a bunch of guerrillas, they were approaching from the north. At the same time, a NATO squad was moving in on their position. They'd been outnumbered 10-1. Like it or not, these mines represented their best, maybe only way of making it out. To activate the mine dispenser, they could either set a timer or trigger it remotely. They scattered the mines and sat tight, waiting for the enemy. Facing those kind of odds, it was the only thing they could do.
Dimitriou, engage that man, left.
Major Gavras fell in the fighting that followed. Finally, the message came. A second helo was inbound.
They dispatched another.
Major Gavras was important, worth the risk.
And Alexis, he took part in the fighting.
Yep, he'd been in the thick of it.
Do you think the Major's death had any impact on the war?
It's hard to tell. A lot of experienced officers died that day. Had he lived, he may have filled the gap. But let's face it, once CSAT pulled out, the Altus armed forces were through. The whole thing was over as soon as it had begun.
Despite the NATO invasion being a disaster.
Sure, that only held it back for so long. In the end, 3 days of fighting, that's all it took. But the human cost, the lasting damage, that's another thing altogether.
And Costas, how did your paths cross? I'm still a little unclear.
Oh, Lieutenant Dimitriou. He came to IDAP, to our camp. The AAF provided us with information on the mines. Guy was a wreck, but his training had kicked in. He documented the minefields, well, as best he could. But for Marcos, it was already too late. He'd already found one, poor bastard.
And the wounded? Did Costas have anything to say about them?
Off the record.
Pens leaving paper.
His name's come up in connection to a war crime. There's allegations he carried out a summary execution.
Okay. You've mentioned Alexis was with the guerrillas. Do you know what became of him?
He was killed. Shot, I think. It's sad, honestly. Both their lives, they ended here. Just a few feet apart. Next to the church where they were probably baptized.
Honestly, Nathan, all this information, it's a godsend. You've given me loads to work with here.
It's nothing, really.
Now, there's just one last question I'd like to ask you. It's subjective, so take your time.
Sure. Fire away.
In your opinion, who's most to blame for all the suffering in Orio Castro? NATO? The guerrillas? CSAT? The Altis Armed Forces? Or, I don't know, something else? Do you think the Major's death had any impact on the war, despite the NATO invasion being a disaster?
Maybe. Certainly the government had become frustrated with NATO and vice versa. But the others...
So, these leaflets, they were a warning to the town.
Yeah, they confirmed the offensive. Or maybe they were just sick of all the extra paperwork. These leaflets, they were dropped maybe a day before the fighting began.
Do you happen to remember it well? The airstrike, I mean.
Yeah. October 13th. Cluster bomb. Town was shook up pretty bad. The army... They scattered the mines and sat tight, waiting for the enemy. Facing those kind of odds, it was the only thing they could do.
You've seen things from both sides. I mean, now as an NGO, too.
I've seen a few things.
You've seen things from both sides. I mean, now as an NGO.
I'd have to say... You know, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think it's quite so black and white. It's more black and gray. Hell, gray and gray, you know? No one side can be held accountable for the bloodshed here. No one action got us where we are now. I don't know. What can we do? Just double down on our efforts. Heal the wounds. And the folks here in Orio Castro, they're the ones that have suffered. This is the reality. This is war.
Hey, Nathan, I have a link for you. It's to my article. Be gentle, it's a draft. My editor's running it by legal as we speak.
Oh, right, yeah, the mines. I've still got work to do here.
Of course. Okay, well, thanks again for everything. Should I let you get on, or...?
I don't mind talking. Maybe I can tell you a bit more about the town.
Mac, got a quick update for you.
I'm listening, bud.
Yeah, so NATO have bagged and tagged their dead.
Jesus, Andy, anyone ever mention you got a way with words?
Not really. Anywho, it's a half-assed job. Still a bunch of landmines around. Worth checking out?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'll head up there shortly. See what I can do. I don't know if it's helpful, but, I remember hearing about a bunch of NATO guys that wound up working with the guerrillas.
Really? Wait, you mean during the Altis invasion?
No, that's the thing. Beforehand. Rumor has it they escaped Stratus, made it over here, and joined up with the locals.
Thanks, yeah. I'll definitely do some digging.
God damn it, Marcos. Kate, hi, just got a positive ID on our guy at the church.
Then it's confirmed. It's definitely him.
Yeah, it's Marcos. No doubt about it. Andy, you there?
What? Yeah, I'm not sleeping. What's up? We done here?
Yeah, I'll meet you by the van in 5.
All right, Mac. I'll get us packed up.
Only if it's not too much effort, Sleeping Beauty. Hey, it's me.
Hello. Did I hear correctly? You're on the move?
Yeah, next job. Some truck hit an AT mine yesterday. Little ways out from here, I said we'd check up on it.
Okay. I'll not keep you. Thanks again. And good luck out there, Nathan. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye, Kate.